The entertainment and media industry, like most industries, has obviously been severely impacted by the global recession. And looking over the 5-year period, what we're actually seeing is probably around about an overall 2% compound decline in the first 2 years of the forecast period, followed by round about a 6% compound growth for 2011 through to 13. That's the kind of headline numbers, but obviously there is a lot that lies behind that, both in terms of how the consumer is behaving and also how the advertiser is behaving. Not only that, but obviously, as in previous years, there's considerable regional differences. It would be fair to say that the emerging markets are still performing better than the developed markets. There are one or two short-term exceptions. Russia actually has been quite adversely hit on the advertising side in the first couple of quarters of this year. But by and large, the emerging markets performing better than the developed markets. So that's a consistent sort of trend. In fact, the direction of change is really quite clear. And what we're seeing is that particularly as ad revenues fall away and the consumer looking for greater value, we're seeing this absolute movement to, we call it the digital migration. The pace of that digital migration is increasing significantly as a result of the recession. We're seeing consumers, as I said, looking for better value and as a consequence often moving online to get their content, unfortunately often for free, or at least that's what the consumer would like it to be. Technology and the consumer is definitely at the core of the change that we're seeing in terms of digital migration. The consumer in particular is taking control in the sense of consuming content when they want to and where they want to and on the device they want to. And really what that is creating is, if you like, we used to talk about prime time, and now really we need to talk about our time or their time, being the consumer. And that really is a huge shift. And as a result of that, many organizations within the E&M world are having to take a fundamental look at how they deliver content, how they price content, how they package content. And clearly at the heart of a lot of that change in consumer behavior is the net generation. The net generation, if anything, is becoming even more influential on their parents and their grandparents. I mean, everyone is looking for a better deal these days and better value. And therefore, actually, parents are listening to their children. And those children or the net generation, are having a significant impact. The other things that we're sort of seeing is, obviously, we're seeing a lot more of multitasking. Multitasking is something that we now just take for granted. I mean, if you go on a train, you'll see people doing, even on a train, consuming entertainment and media 2 or 3 different ways, even when they're going to the office. And obviously at home, it's even more so. We're seeing, in terms of the consumer looking for better deals, we're now seeing, obviously, sideloading beginning to become much more popular, and that is creating some issues on the mobile revenues for music companies. We're seeing time shifting. That really reflects the my time versus prime time concept. So really, we're seeing a lot of different factors here, and all of those factors are basically around the migration to digital. While all this digital migration is going on, and it may sound all fine for the consumer, and in fact, more media is being consumed at this moment by the consumer, so that's good news. The problem is monetizing that demand. And this really is, I guess, one of the critical issues for the industry as a whole. We are seeing some of their revenue streams, particularly the advertising revenue stream, really almost collapse in many cases at the moment. That's a struggle. That is making, obviously, corporates look at their cost base. But more long-term, and I think more profoundly, the big challenge is, how does one adapt one's business models to cope with this shift, this digital migration? So really, we've got a couple of issues. We've got some short-term cost reduction issues, but we've also got the challenge of looking for different types of business models. And actually, inevitably, I think, it's going to be a range of business models for each type of company. There isn't going to be one. There's going to have to be numerous combinations. And those combinations are basically going to result from different collaborations across the value chain. And as a consequence, new revenue models will appear. I touched upon before and have commented on the declining advertising market, particularly this year. Overall, actually, we're expecting advertising globally to be down round about between 12 and 13% this year. Some markets actually going down in excess of that, even up to 20%. Beginning then to recover slightly in 2010, and as I mentioned earlier, then beginning to pick up again through the latter part of the forecast period. However, what we are seeing is that a lot of that advertising that has disappeared in the last few months may never return. And in fact, the overall level of advertising spend that we're predicting in 2013 is still below that of 2008. A couple of reasons for that. The fragmentation that we're seeing, whether it's in terms of channels or whether it's in terms of online activity, is basically giving more supply of advertising. Okay, so there are more places where people can actually place their adverts, and obviously at a time when demand is actually shrinking. So what we're getting is a reduction in price. And even by 2013, we will see a lot more ads probably than we're seeing right now. But the price of those ads is likely to have decreased. The other thing that we're likely to be seeing by 2013 is that as during this period many corporates are realizing that they need to get closer to their customer with their advertising, their marketing activity, they will have migrated online. And I believe that will, in terms of accountability, have shown some good returns. And as a consequence of which, it is likely that certain traditional types of strongholds of advertising may not recover to the same degree. They will recover, but maybe not to the same degree. The migration to digital I've mentioned in terms of the impact on the consumer, but how is industry actually reacting to this? And before I even go into that area, one of the things I wanted just to highlight is the fact that this trend is not a new trend. This trend we have started 3 or 4 years ago, but what we had in those previous 3 or 4 years was very, very strong ad markets. And while that ad revenue was strong, to some degree, it masked over some of these transitions. We now have a burning platform, and what that means is that companies now have to address this issue. The companies that will emerge strongest out of this, I believe, will be those that take a couple of actions. First of all, addressing their underlying cost base, but then secondly, really looking and seizing the opportunities by this digital migration. At the end of the day, we are seeing new businesses being created, either through collaboration, joint venturing, use of technology, integration of brands and content. There's a lot happening out there that is really good. We are seeing many new small media companies taking advantage of this. And I think that the companies that really embrace that change and that opportunity are going to be the ones that really come out of this in a very strong position. So what we have here is a burning platform full of huge opportunities. And I think that's an extremely important message. And at the end of the day, a lot of media companies are making investments of time and effort into this area at the moment, while at the same time, obviously, taking efforts to control their underlying cost base. So this is the time to be bold in order to come out of the downturn in a much stronger position and in a position to really monetize the opportunities of digital. I'm sure that you can see, therefore, from my comments that I'm certainly of the belief that there is a silver lining to this, what is definitely a dark cloud, and for many is an absolutely fascinating and exciting time to be in the media industry. I think the opportunities for people entering the industry, particularly from the next generation, actually is great, and it is a really good time to be looking at this sector and to be looking for opportunities to work in the sector.